This week, the Steelers travel to Dublin to take on the Minnesota Vikings in their Week 4 matchup in the NFL's International Series. It's the first game ever being played in Dublin in National Football League history, and we're going to be covering it right here on Steelers Talk on Sunday morning. We'll be waking up bright and early with you guys. I hope you'll join us. 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time is when me and Ponzi will be going live for our live watch party. We'll have an hour-long pregame show followed by live play-by-play and post-game reaction as well. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already for all of our in-depth previews that we put out for every single Steelers game, just like this one today. Also, we have live watch parties like we're going to be doing on Sunday morning, and then we'll have the post-game reactions for every single game this year right here on Pittsburgh Steelers Talk, brought to you by Chat Sports. So make sure you click that subscribe button to join the family today. All right, so this matchup, guys, at historic Croke Park in Dublin, Ireland, the 2-1 Pittsburgh Steelers will be taking on the 2-1 Minnesota Vikings. So it's definitely going to be a very interesting matchup here, guys. But make no mistake, all right? I think the Steelers are pretty much the home team in this game, all right? There's a long-standing relationship with the Steelers in Ireland. There's a huge Steelers fan base in that country, and I expect most of Croke Park to be filled with black and gold on Sunday morning. There will be some purple and gold in there as well, but I do expect most of it to be Steelers colors, and I think that with the size, with the noise advantage and all that stuff, I think that's going to slightly favor the Pittsburgh Steelers in this football game. Now, there are a number of players on both teams that are out this week. Alex Highsmith has already been deemed out this week. Isaiah Loudermilk, of course, has been put on IR. He will not be playing. And then Blake Cashman and Aaron Jones, two starting players for them, are not playing. They are on IR right now. Cashman in particular is a big one, guys. He's one of the linchpins of their defense. Missing him will be big for that Brian Flores defense. And then Donovan Jackson, their rookie starting left guard, will be out this week as well, which means it'll be Blake Brandel, their backup guard, going up against all-pro defensive tackle Cam Heyward. And, man, that sounds like a matchup that Captain Cam can absolutely feast in. Brandel's already played a little bit this season, has not looked great. I think that's a matchup that Cam Heyward and the Steelers defense have to take advantage of. Now, some injuries to watch this week. Joey Porter Jr. and Deshaun Elliott are both questionable to play. Porter with a hamstring, Elliott with the knee that he's been dealing with. Right now, Mark Caboli from the Pat McAfee Show, for what it's worth, said that he doesn't expect these two to play on Sunday, but they are already practicing. They are practicing in limited fashion to start this week. And Mike Tomlin said earlier in the week that their level of participation and the quality of that participation will be their guide as to whether or not they play on Sunday. Then some big injuries that the Vikings have been dealing with that they're expected to get back. Christian Darrisaw, their excellent left tackle, is expected to play. He's been dealing with a knee injury. And then Ryan Kelly, who's been dealing with a concussion, their starting center, will be back this week as well. So they're getting back to more healthy along that offensive line, which can only mean good things for Kevin O'Connell's offense moving forward. Speaking of Kevin O'Connell, that's how we start our coaching and scheme breakdown here. He's 36-18, currently has the best record in the National Football League among coaches in one-score games. All right, I think it's over 70% right now, which is an absurd number. But he hasn't been in the league as long as someone like Mike Tomlin, who has an over 60% win rate in those situations 18 years into his NFL career, but nonetheless very impressive from Kevin. He also runs their offense there. They run a McVay West Coast style offense. They mix things up in the run game. They have a really creative passing game, one of the better offensive structures in the National Football League today, and one of the best overall play callers and sequencers in the game today as well. And then the defensive scheme, the Flores, I like to call it the Flores chaos scheme because it's just chaos out there, man. Defensive rotations, blitzes, all this different stuff. Super creative, modern scheme run by Brian Flores himself. It's definitely going to be a handful for the Pittsburgh Steelers to handle this week. In terms of what the Vikings have done so far this year, they won in dramatic fashion on Monday Night Football versus the Bears in Week 1, 27-24. Then J.J. McCarthy looked terrible in Week 2 at home versus the Atlanta Falcons with a 22-6 loss. And last week versus the Bengals with Carson Wentz making his Vikings debut, they won 48-10, and Isaiah Rodgers is the first player ever to get a 99 PFF grade in a singular game in the history of Pro Football Focus grading. So what a game for him. But you take a look at the roster here for Minnesota. Carson Wentz will be the starting quarterback with J.J. McCarthy still dealing with an ankle sprain. Their offensive line, Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill, excellent tackle duo. So if you're expecting TJ Watt and Nick Herbig to dominate this game, that's going to be a little bit tougher with this tackle duo this week. But where they're a little bit softer is on the interior. Blake Brandel, as we talked about, left guard. Then you got Ryan Kelly and Will Fries, who are good players, but they're certainly not at the level of O'Neill and Darrisaw, in my opinion, but very solid offensive line when this group is healthy. Then their weapons. They play a lot of three receiver sets. You're going to see Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, who's coming back from suspension, by the way, this week, and Adam Thielen. That's a really good wide receiver trio, in my opinion. Then you got Jordan Mason, a very underrated running back, had a really good week last week, and then TJ Hawkinson is their starting tight end. Then on the defensive side of the ball, you will see this group out there the most. Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel will be their starting edge rushers there at outside linebacker positions. Jonathan Allen and Jalen Redmond are their starting defensive ends, even though that's more of an interior defensive line position that's called defensive end. And then their nose tackle is former Steeler Javon Hargrave. And, certainly a light front, especially in the middle there. There's not a whole lot of big bodies. They got rid of their nose tackle last year, Harrison Phillips. So that's certainly a vulnerability the Steelers can take advantage of, especially because their off-ball backers in the middle are also not that big. Ivan Pace Jr. went undrafted because he's so tiny. He's a good player, good blitzer, all that different stuff, but he can be taken advantage of in the run game. And then Eric Wilson has actually played pretty well replacing Blake Cashman in this very critical role. These linebackers, they ask these guys to do a lot in this scheme. And I think both these guys have done a really good job so far this year. Then in the secondary, you're going to have Byron Murphy and Isaiah Rodgers, a really solid cornerback duo here in Minnesota. They run the quarters and palm stuff that they run here in Minnesota really, really well. Then they got Theo Jackson and Harrison Smith as their two starting safeties. And then Josh Metellus is their nickel. He plays in the slot. He plays linebacker for them at times. He's all over the place. So you got to watch out for Josh Metellus. He's a big X factor for this Brian Flores defense. Now, still to come here on the Steelers Talk preview here in Week 4. Keys to victory versus the Vikings. Then I got my Carson Wentz scouting report for you guys, and then I've got my official Week 4 score prediction for your Pittsburgh Steelers. But before we get into the rest of this week's preview, let's have a word from our sponsor today at Omaha Steaks. And whether you guys want handcrafted steaks to delicious fall favorites, Omaha Steaks delivers the world's best steak experience. Enjoy USDA-certified tender steaks, juicy burgers, cozy and convenient comfort meals, plus tailgating favorites like chicken wings, smash burgers, and big deli-style franks. And now during their Red Hot Sale event, you can get 50% off site-wide when you go to omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $35 off with promo code STEELERS at checkout. So not only do you guys get a 50% off discount on your entire order just because of the Red Hot Sale event, but you also get a $35 additional dollars off when you use our code STEELERS. So you're getting over 50% off your order when you use our code STEELERS at checkout. And Cassie and I, we have certainly taken advantage of this deal, the Red Hot Sale event here from Omaha Steaks. We ordered a bunch of steaks. We've been having steak 2 to 3 times a week. I love the way that I make steaks. I put butter in there with some thyme and rosemary. And, of course, you got that olive oil in the pan. You just sear that up for about 6-7 minutes or so. And it's absolutely beautiful, and that's what we've been making just about every single day ever since this offer came in from Omaha Steaks. You guys can take advantage of that as well. Get fired up for fall grilling with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during their Red Hot Sale event. Plus, you get an extra $35 off when you use code STEELERS at checkout. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an additional $35 off with promo code STEELERS at checkout. See site for details, and a big thank you to Omaha Steaks for sponsoring today's edition of Steelers Talk. My first key to victory for the Pittsburgh Steelers this week is to make life hard for Carson Wentz. And one of my biggest gripes with the Steelers defense to this point is they haven't made life tough enough for some of the quarterbacks that they have faced. All right, now last week, Carson Wentz, pretty efficient day versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Now keep in mind, he was playing with a giant lead for most of this game, and Cincinnati's defense is terrible. But 14 of 20, pretty darn good for 173 yards. Total, he had 2 touchdowns to no interceptions, and a quarterback rating of almost 130. So good week for Carson Wentz. Wasn't asked to carry the team or anything like that. The defense did a lot of the work for him in that blowout victory at US Bank Stadium, but he certainly did right by himself in Kevin O'Connell's offense in his first action as a Minnesota Viking, I should say. My scouting report on him, guys, is that he's a serviceable NFL backup. I need to see more than just one decent game against the Cincinnati Bengals defense for me to call you a good starter or something like that. But we know Kevin O'Connell can get the most out of these gingers, all right? So you got the size aspect of things. He's got a fantastic arm in terms of the strength of it. He can rifle balls in the tight windows, and he is a plus athlete. Even at this stage in his career, he can run around a little bit if you do not account for him. Certainly not the strapping young buck he used to be in terms of almost winning an MVP there with the Philadelphia Eagles, but he can still run around a little bit. But the cons have really come back to bite him a lot in his career. Accuracy, he plays with a really wide base in the pocket, which leads to some inaccuracies. Decision-making has not been fantastic throughout his career, and he's not the best mental processor either. If the Steelers rotate coverage, do some stuff to disguise some things, they can get him to hold the football and take some sacks. He even took some sacks last week against Cincinnati. So I think he's okay. He's nothing special, and I think that if this Steelers defense is up to its billing, he should not have a very good football game in Dublin, especially if that crowd is going crazy for the Steelers. But I think that you have to make Wentz think, and you have to make him make mistakes. You don't give him any easy answers. Unfortunately, I think the Steelers defense has been giving opposing quarterbacks some too easy answers throughout the first 3 weeks of the season. But hopefully Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin come with a little bit of a better game plan this week, and they can stop this passing attack that Minnesota has to offer. But if Pittsburgh wins, I think turnovers are going to need to play a big role, just like they did last week. All right, we're going to talk about the offensive keys to victories here in just a second. But, if you can get 2 or 3 interceptions on Carson Wentz, if you can force a fumble, that's going to be big, especially if it's in enemy territory and you give this offense an opportunity on a short field to maybe go get a quick touchdown. That could be the difference in the game. So really look out for this defense to hopefully get some really good pressure on Carson Wentz, make him think a little bit, force him into some tough decisions, and then capitalize. So that's going to be a big-time key to victory for the Pittsburgh Steelers. A good way to do that is to take advantage of the matchup advantage that you have with Cam Heyward versus Blake Brandel. Now, I think that there's certain situations that Brandel will get some help, and he will get some double-team help, but I really do think the Steelers are going to be doing their classic 5-man dog blitzes, which means that it's 1-for-1, mano-a-mano, between the Steelers' defensive line and then the Vikings' offensive line. And in those situations, Cam Heyward pretty clearly has the best matchup out of anybody on the Steelers roster right now. We talked about it earlier, but Darisaw versus Herbig, I like Darisaw quite a bit. Same thing with TJ Watt and Brian O'Neill. I think O'Neill will be able to stop Watt at points, but Watt is certainly going to eat in certain points in this game. Keanu Benson versus Ryan Kelly, Derek Harmon versus a good guard and Will Fries. I think that, the big matchup that you got to take advantage of here is Captain Cam. He's played pretty darn well the last 2 weeks. He really helped force 2 big turnovers in the red zone last week against the Patriots. He's going to need another really good game and be a standout player in this one, in my opinion. Then another thing that you have to do defensively is to not let them win deep, all right? Don't let these guys get 20-plus yard receptions to Justin Jefferson all day long. What I would do if I'm the Steelers is I'm trying to make Carson Wentz pick apart my defense, and go methodical, the way that Drake May did last week. I don't have nearly as much confidence in Carson Wentz to do what Drake May did last week, where he's converting on 3rd downs and 4th downs and extending drives and having a bunch of plays in a drive, right? I feel like this Vikings offense, especially with a guy like Wentz, is going to really rely on quick hitters, is going to really rely on getting big chunks down the field, relying on their star power. And I think the more plays you ask Carson Wentz to play in a given drive, I think the higher the chances for a turnover, okay? So I think that is a very important part of getting Carson Wentz to throw these interceptions, to get a forced fumble on him, is you just have more opportunities for this pass rush. So I think that needs to be the game plan for the Steelers. Keep the top on the defense. And then we get to the offensive side of the ball here, and I think what's really important, especially at the beginning of this game, guys, is to find ways to beat man coverage. because the Steelers have been seeing a lot of man, and Brian Flores, the defensive coordinator here in Minnesota, doesn't play a lot of man coverage usually. He plays a lot of man match, and he plays some Tampa 2, but he plays man coverage when they go to their cover 0 looks. But, in terms of true like cover 2 man or cover 1 or something like that, they don't run a lot of that here in Minnesota. But I think this week will be different because I think Flores is going to be looking at the defensive film from the Seahawks and the Patriots and the Jets and how they were able to handle the Steelers wide receivers in man coverage. And he's going to say, well, I'm going to come out with that. And if they have answers to that, I'll go back to my normal blitz-heavy stuff, the quarter stuff. But if they can't beat our guys in man, why would I do anything else? So I think that we will see some man coverage from the Minnesota Vikings to start this game, and it'll be on Arthur Smith and Aaron Rodgers to find ways to get them out of that. And, whether that's bunch looks, whether that's rub routes, whether that's, people just straight up winning on their routes, getting the ball to Calvin Austin III more. He's your best man-to-man separator right now. Maybe you should feature Calvin Austin III more early in this football game. Whatever you got to do, if you're Arthur Smith and Aaron Rodgers, get them out of man coverage so you can go from there. Another thing that the Steelers need to do to win this game, in my opinion, is pound the rock effectively. Now, you might be saying at home, but Jack, the Steelers haven't run the football well the first 3 weeks, and you'd be right about that, which is one of the main reasons why I'm concerned about the Steelers offense heading into this game, because the teams that beat Flores and the guys that beat this defense the best are the teams that run the ball well. All right, the best example I can think of, both times the Lions played the Minnesota Vikings last year. They played a lot of under center. They ran the football a lot, very effectively on them, and then they did hard play action off of that, which really destroys some of the pressure looks that they do here in Minnesota, all right, because it affects the linebackers so much. So if you can get the run game going, especially against this kind of lighter defensive front from Minnesota, not only do they have a lighter defensive line with Hargrave as their nose tackle, Jonathan Allen as their 3 tech, and then Jalen Redmond as a 5 tech, but they also have smaller linebackers. So if you can find a way to run the ball up the middle, down the throat on these guys, that could lead to some very good things for the Pittsburgh Steelers offensively. Unfortunately, the Steelers aren't doing that right now. The offensive line isn't getting much push. There's blown assignments. It's not well coordinated at all, if I'm being completely frank with you. So there's going to have to be a big switch and a big turnaround from the Steelers' run game this week, in my opinion, guys, and get Jaylen Warren going, or else it might be tough sledding all day long for the Steelers' offense. Then we get to another way that they can attack the quarters and palms heavy looks that we see from Flores defense, and that's to attack the short and intermediate middle of the field. And usually palms coverage and quarters coverage is played with a 4-man rush, all right? But what the Vikings do differently is they play quarters and palms from a 5-man pressure look, all right? Which means you leave the middle of the field wide ass open, all right? And the Steelers were able to identify this in the Bengals defense last year. And if you remember that first game in Cincinnati, that Russell Wilson had all those yards just dumping it off to Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren over the short middle of the field. I think we're going to see a lot of that concept from the Steelers in this football game, where they're trying to exploit the middle of the field. And who knows if it's going to work. We're going to see come Sunday. It certainly worked against Cincinnati last year. But if Flores comes out with a lot of these 5-man pressure looks from quarters and palms, I would expect to see a lot of those looks from the Steelers passing game this week. Then also another thing that you can do is punish them with play action. All right, we saw this again from Ben Johnson and the Lions offense last year, where you can go hard play action. It's going to affect the linebackers and their positioning, and you can rip those intermediate dig routes over the middle of the field. Now, this is another thing that the Steelers have not done. They have not thrown the ball over the middle of the field all that often. After the Jets game, they have not done a lot of under center play action stuff, especially over the middle of the field. So, will we see this on Sunday? I hope so. That's how you beat a Brian Flores defense. And if they don't do it, I think it's going to be a lot of the same from the Steelers passing attack than we've seen from the first 3 weeks. And then, talking specifically about Aaron Rodgers here, guys, he can't play the way that he did last year versus the same Viking defense and Brian Flores in London. I mean, it's crazy that he's playing the Vikings in an international game 2 years in a row. But last year, man, it was a rough go. He had a game-losing interception on the final drive to try and go win it. He had over 50 pass attempts. He didn't have a great percentage in terms of the completion percentage. He had some nice throws in that game, but the quarterback rating was not good at all. The passer rating was at 54.9. It was a really tough game for Aaron Rodgers versus Brian Flores' defense. Now, obviously, there's a lot going wrong with the Jets' offense last year, but a lot of those same issues are popping up with Pittsburgh this year, so hopefully Rodgers can have a better performance in this one. And, I think this game is probably going to be low scoring, and because of that, it's probably going to be pretty close late. So what the Steelers have been able to do in 2 of their 3 games is make the play late, all right? They got those 2 stops against the Jets in the first game, and then they had the game-sealing drive with the Boswell field goal. And then last week versus the Patriots, they got to stop when they needed, and they made a drive when they needed to late in the fourth quarter. They're probably going to have to do the same thing against the Vikings this week. And, it's going to be against a Flores defense where, it's going to be tough to throw the football if they know you're throwing the football. So I'm actually going to predict the Steelers to lose this week. This is the first time I'm predicting the Steelers to lose. I think it's going to be a very low-scoring game. I think there'll be some turnovers that lead to some points. And it'll be a very defensive-centric football game. I think it's going to be 16-13. Vikings win in a close one. And I think after this game, frankly, there's going to have to be a lot of soul-searching from Arthur Smith, Aaron Rodgers, and the Steelers offense, and maybe consider changing offensive philosophies heading into the bye week in week 5. It might be that bad. So it's your turn. Let me know down there in the comment section. Predict the score of Steelers versus Vikings this week. I've got 16-13 Minnesota. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. And that'll be it for this week's Steelers preview. We'll be live once again, guys, on Sunday for this matchup and our live watch party. That all begins at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Till next time, guys, here we go, Steelers.